The dress is the wrong shade of ivory. Billy knows this because she picked it out herself. Stood in that little boutique in town for 40 minutes while Sarah held up swatches. And Billy kept saying, yes, that one, that's perfect. And the whole time she was thinking about how Dorian's eyes looked when he laughed. How they crinkled at the corners. How she had memorized the exact sound of his laugh the way other people memorize prayers. That was 8 months ago. Now she is standing at the edge of a property that costs more than her entire life put together, holding a garment bag over one shoulder and a list of vendor contacts on her phone. And somewhere inside that enormous stone estate, Dorian is waiting to marry her sister. Her sister. Billy tells herself it doesn't hurt the way it used to. She has told herself this so many times it has almost become true. Here is what nobody tells you about being the maid of honor at a wedding that breaks your heart. The job is relentless. There is always something that needs doing. Flowers. Seating charts. The caterer who suddenly cannot source the right mushrooms. It turns out grief is much easier to carry when your hands are full. She steps through the iron gates of Greyveil Estate, and the world changes in a way she cannot name. The air is different here. Thicker. Like the property itself is breathing. And then, for just a moment, something in the treeline moves. Not an animal. Something larger. Something that goes completely still the instant she looks up, as if it knew she would. Billy stares at the dark between the trees for 3 full seconds. Then her phone buzzes. The florist. Again. She looks away. But here is what she will think about later. In the dark, in the room they gave her on the 3rd floor, with the window that won't quite latch, she will think, it was watching me. Whatever it was already watching me before I arrived. And she will wonder, what does it mean that the thought didn't frighten her at all? Chapter 1. The driveway was longer than it had any right to be. Billy walked it because the taxi had deposited her at the gate, and apparently Greyveil Estate did not believe in driving guests directly to the door. She had her garment bag, her rolling suitcase, and the particular set of her jaw that her mother used to call Billy's work face. The expression she wore when something was hard and she intended to do it anyway without complaint. Sarah had described the place as a venue. A charming historic venue with rustic character. It was a castle. Not a full castle. Technically, no turrets, no moat, but the kind of massive stone manor that had clearly been built by someone who wanted to make other people feel small. It rose out of the Northumbrian countryside like it had grown there. All dark limestone and tall windows and ivy that had been climbing those walls for a century at minimum. The grounds stretched in every direction. Formal gardens on the left going wild at their edges, dense woodland behind, a lake somewhere in the distance that Billy could smell before she could see it. She stopped walking. That was strange. She couldn't usually smell water from this distance. She filed the thought away under things to think about when you are not on a schedule and kept moving. The front door was opened before she reached it by a woman in her 50s with close-cropped gray hair and the practiced efficiency of someone who had been managing this estate for years. She had a face that was kind around the eyes and firm everywhere else, and she was looking at Billy the way people sometimes did, like she was being measured against something, found adequate, and filed. "You must be the maid of honor," the woman said. Not a question. Billy Ashworth. She shifted the garment bag. The bride's sister. Mara. The woman stepped back to let her through. "I manage the estate. Your sister arrived this morning with her, with the groom's party. She's in the Rose Salon if you'd like to." "Vendors first," Billy said automatically. "I need to walk the ceremony space and confirm the setup timeline. Then I'll find Sarah. She won't want to see me anyway until she's had her lashes done." Mara paused. Then something shifted in her expression. Not quite a smile, but close to one. "Practical," she said. "Maid of honor," Billy replied, as if that explained everything. It did mostly. Mara walked her through the ground floor, which was the kind of beautiful that made Billy feel slightly guilty for noticing it while she was supposed to be cataloging vendor logistics. Stone floors worn smooth by centuries of footsteps. High ceilings with exposed timber. Fireplace in every room, each one large enough to stand in. The furniture was old and good. Not the fussy antique kind, but the kind of old that meant it had been used hard by generations of people who had actually lived here. Someone still lived here. She could feel it. Is the owner? Does he stay on the property during events? Billy asked, keeping her voice neutral. Mr. Gray is in residence, yes. Mara's voice went precisely careful in a way that was itself a kind of answer. He keeps to the east wing during guest events. You won't see much of him. Mr. Gray. She'd seen his name in the contracts. Matthew Gray. The estate had been in his family for. She'd looked it up, because she always looked things up, 7 generations. Which was notable enough. What was more notable was that in every photograph she'd found of him online, he looked exactly the same age. Same dark hair, same pale gray eyes, same unsmiling face. A photograph from 15 years ago. A photograph from the year before. The same. She decided the photos were just bad for dating purposes. People often looked ageless in formal portraits. The ceremony space was in the Great Hall. A room that should not have been as beautiful as it was, all soaring stone and natural light from the high windows, and yet it landed in Billy's chest with the weight of something true. She stood in the middle of it with her clipboard and her spreadsheet, and she thought, involuntarily, Sarah is going to cry the second she walks in here. Ugly cry. The good kind. Something tightened behind her sternum. She wrote, confirm chair placement, 3 p.m. She wrote, florist, delivery window 9 to 11 a.m. Saturday. She did not write, you are going to stand in this room on Saturday and watch the person you have loved in secret for 3 years marry your sister, and you are going to smile the whole time, and you are going to mean it, because Sarah is your person and Dorian does make her happy even if he never once. She stopped writing. He never once looked at you the way she wanted him to. He never once. Is everything all right? She spun. He was standing in the doorway of the great hall. Not Mara, not Dorian, not anyone she recognized. A man in dark clothing, tall enough that the doorframe did not offer him much clearance, watching her with eyes the color of winter water. Pale gray, nearly silver. Utterly still. He was the most arresting person she had ever seen, and for one disorienting second, she could not locate a single coherent thought. Then she remembered how to be Billy. Fine, she said crisply. Just mapping the space. I'm the maid of honor. I'm sorry, are we not supposed to be in this room at this hour? Mara said the ceremony setup didn't start until. You can be anywhere on this property. His voice was low and even, and he said it like a fact, not a permission. Like he was simply describing how the world worked. I own it. Oh, Mr. Gray. Right, she said. I should have, sorry. I'm Billy Ashworth. The bride's sister. He said it before she finished. His eyes moved across her face in a way that was not rude, exactly, but was extremely thorough. Like he was reading something. I know who you are. A silence opened between them. Billy was not the kind of person who found silences uncomfortable. She had learned to wait people out, to let the air stay empty rather than fill it with nervous talking. But this silence had texture. It pressed against her in a way she couldn't account for. Well, she said finally, I'll try to stay out of your way. He said nothing. She turned back to her clipboard, and when she looked up again a moment later, he was gone. Just gone. As if the doorway had swallowed him. Billy stood very still for a moment. Then she wrote on her clipboard in very small letters, in the margin where she thought she'd never look. Eyes like ice. Stayed anyway. She crossed it out immediately. She did not cross it out quite thoroughly enough. Chapter 2. She found Sarah in the Rose Salon, which was exactly as excessive as the name suggested. Dusty pink walls, too many mirrors. A chaise lounge that had no business being as comfortable as it looked. Sarah was horizontal on it in a silk robe, phone in hand, looking radiant in the way that only happened when someone was genuinely, stupidly happy. Billy stood in the doorway for a moment before her sister noticed her. She had always loved Sarah. This was not a complicated thing, even when everything else was. Sarah was 3 years younger and had always been the beautiful one, the charming one, the one people looked at first in a room. And she had never once wielded any of this. She was just Sarah, loud and warm, and a little oblivious in the specific way of people who have always been loved easily. Billy had always needed to earn it. Bill. Sarah launched herself off the chaise in a chaos of silk and hair. Oh my God, I was worried you got stuck on the motorway. There was something on the radio about. I'm here. Billy caught her, solid and grounded. I'm here. I've already walked the ceremony space. The florist confirmed for 9. The string quartet is driving up tomorrow morning. Stop. Sarah pulled back and grabbed her face. Look at me. Are you okay? I'm great. Billy. I'm here to help you get married. I'm great. Sarah searched her eyes for a long moment with the particular scrutiny of someone who had known her since birth. Then she did something that was worse than asking. She just hugged her again tighter and said softly, I know this is hard. Don't, Billy said, voice even. Dorian never. Sarah, please. A pause. Then Sarah let go, and Billy straightened her cardigan, and they were both very busy looking at different parts of the room for a moment. The estate is beautiful, Billy said. Who found it? Dorian did. It's his friend's place, actually. Matthew Gray. Do you know that name? Apparently they were at school together. Sarah pulled her back to the chaise and started gesturing at a spread of color swatches. He's supposed to be fascinating. Very private, very wealthy. Hasn't spoken to most of Dorian's friend group in years. Dorian says he went through something. Some kind of loss. He doesn't talk about it. He was in the Great Hall earlier, Billy said, neutral. Sarah looked up. You met him? What's he like? Billy thought of pale gray eyes. The absence of apology in them. Quiet, she said. That night she could not sleep. This was not unusual for her. Sleep had always been a negotiation. She gave it things, memories and anxieties and to-do lists, and it gave her a few hours of dark in return. But tonight was different. Tonight her skin felt wrong, and the window that wouldn't latch let in a thread of night air that smelled of forest and something she couldn't name, something deep and green and alive, and she lay in the dark of the third-floor room and felt, of all things, called. That was the only word for it. Like something outside was saying, come here, in a frequency she felt in her teeth. She did not go to the window. She went to the window. The grounds were dark and still, the formal gardens just visible in the thin moonlight. The tree-line at the edge of the property stood solid and black. Nothing moved. And then it did. At first she thought it was a shadow, just a shift in the dark between the trees, the eye playing tricks. But it moved again, and this time she tracked it, and it resolved into a shape that was enormous and dark and moving at the edge of the woods with a grace that made her feel like her bones had gone quiet. A wolf. Not a dog. Not anything she had words for, actually, because the scale was wrong. It was too large, far too large, the shoulder height of it wrong for any natural animal. It moved through the tree-line and stopped at the edge of the formal gardens, and in the pale light she could just make out the color of it. Dark, almost black, with a silver cast to the fur that turned it strange and beautiful in the moonlight. It was looking at the estate. It was looking at her window. Billy stood perfectly still. Her heart was not racing. She checked, because it should have been racing, but it wasn't. Something deep and wordless in her recognized the shape in the darkness and said yes, in the way you say yes to something you have been waiting for without knowing it. She pressed her hand flat against the cold glass. The wolf went still. Then it turned and disappeared into the trees, and the tree-line was just trees again, and the grounds were just grounds, and Billy stood at the window in the dark for a long time after with her hand still pressed against the glass, feeling the cold through her palm and thinking, I know you. She didn't know where that came from. She didn't know what it meant. She filed it under the same place she'd filed everything today that didn't make sense. And she told herself she was tired and overwrought, and it was probably just a very large dog. She almost believed it. Chapter 3. She found him in the kitchen at 6 in the morning. Not in the way that suggested he'd been up early. more in the way that suggested he hadn't slept at all. He was standing at the kitchen window with a mug of something that had probably been hot 2 hours ago, looking out at the gardens with the careful stillness of a person who was doing the looking very deliberately, as if the alternative was to look somewhere else, and that was not acceptable. Billy had come down for coffee. She'd come down specifically because she'd thought the main kitchen would be empty at this hour. She stood in the doorway for half a second, and then moved in anyway, because she had a function to cater and a brain that needed caffeine to run, and she was not going to retreat from a kitchen. "Morning," she said, businesslike, heading for the coffee pot. "Miss Ashworth." Not unfriendly, exactly. Just precise. "Billy is fine." She found a mug. Found the coffee. Poured. The kitchen was a good kitchen. Old stone and copper fittings, real pots. The smell of bread from a previous day still in the air. Someone who cooked lived here. "I didn't mean to interrupt." "You didn't." She leaned against the counter, cradled her mug, and looked at him in the early light. He looked, not rested. There was a tension in his jaw that was controlled but present, and something in the way he was holding himself that made her think of an animal that had been running and stopped, not because the running was over, but because the ground had changed beneath it. His eyes, when he finally turned to look at her, were startling close-up. That pale gray, but with a depth behind it that photographs couldn't catch. Like ice above water. "I saw a wolf last night," she said. She hadn't meant to say it. It came out anyway. Something happened in his face. A tightening very fast that he controlled almost instantly. Almost. "The estate borders the national park," he said, voice even. "There are occasionally." "This one was watching the house," she said. "Watching my window." A pause. The kitchen felt smaller suddenly. "You weren't frightened," he said. It wasn't a question. "No." She wrapped both hands around the mug. "That's the strange part. I wasn't frightened at all." She looked at him steadily. "Is there something I should know about this property, Mr. Gray?" He looked back at her for what felt like a very long time. "The grounds are safe," he said finally. "I give you my word." She held his gaze for a moment longer, reading the edges of the sentence he wasn't finishing. Then she nodded. "All right," she said. And she believed him. She didn't know why she believed him. She barely knew him, and he was being exactly as forthcoming as a locked door. But the belief settled in her chest with the solidity of something true. She pushed off the counter, took her mug, and said, "I need to be in the Great Hall by 8. The florist is bringing the arch flowers, and they always try to place them wrong. The south window gives the best light," he said, as she was already moving toward the door. "For the arch. If they put it under the south window, the afternoon sun will." She turned back. He stopped. He looked mildly surprised at himself. "Thank you," she said. He looked away, back out the window. "It's your sister's wedding," he said, which was not quite an explanation. But Billy took it, and she went, and she didn't look back this time. She thought about it all morning anyway. The day ran the way event days always ran. In one direction at speed, with intermittent crises. The florist's van broke down 2 miles from the estate, and Mara had to organize an impromptu pickup. One of the groomsmen discovered he'd left his suit jacket in Edinburgh. The string quartet's cellist had food poisoning, and they spent an anxious hour sourcing a replacement. Billy managed all of it. She made calls. She problem-solved. She rearranged and redirected and smoothed over with the easy competence of someone who had been making things work on limited resources her whole life. What she did not manage was the moment at 2 in the afternoon when Dorian walked through the great hall and found her up a stepladder, adjusting a garland. "Billy." He said her name the way he always had, warm and slightly surprised, as if she were a pleasant coincidence. "God, you look tired. Can I?" "I'm fine," she said from the ladder. "Careful of the chairs, they're just placed." "You always do this," he said. "You always just handle everything. You never ask for." "Dorian." Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that. "I have 40 minutes before the rehearsal walkthrough. Is there something you need?" A pause. She could see him from up there, that familiar face, the face she had spent 3 years feeling things about that she had no right to feel. He looked good. He looked happy. He was going to marry her sister tomorrow, and he was happy, and she was going to stand up there beside him and hand Sarah the ring, and she was fine. "No," he said softly. I hope you know how much it means. That you're here. That you do this." She came down 2 rungs of the ladder. Looked at him properly. "She's my sister," she said simply. He nodded, and she could see that he understood something in that, or thought he did. And then he left, and she climbed back up the ladder, and she stayed up there a little longer than necessary, because the height put some distance between her and the floor, which was where her composure was currently residing. From across the great hall, through the doorway that led to the east passage, Matthew Gray stood in the shadows and watched her on the ladder. His jaw was a hard line. His eyes were pale and burning. He left before she came down. Chapter 4. The rehearsal dinner was in the long dining room. 14 people at a table that could have held 30. Candlelight making everyone look warmer than they probably were. Billy had organized the seating chart. She had very deliberately placed herself at the far end from Dorian and Sarah, next to Mara and a quiet groomsman named Fenn, who turned out to be a landscape architect with strong opinions about soil drainage. She spent a very pleasant hour asking him questions and actually listening to the answers, because she was genuinely interested in how things grew, and because being interested in other people had always been the thing she was best at. Matthew Gray sat at the head of the table. She hadn't thought about him being at the dinner. He was the host. Of course he was at the dinner. He sat at the head in dark clothes with a glass of red wine he barely touched, and he spoke in short, precise sentences when spoken to, and he did not participate in the table's laughter though once, she caught the very edge of something in his expression when Fenn told a particularly good story about a client who'd tried to grow a formal garden in solid clay, and it wasn't quite a smile, but it was the shadow of a shape that wanted to be one. She looked away before he could catch her looking. She looked back once. He was already looking at her. Neither of them acknowledged it. The wine was very good. She had 2 glasses, which was one more than her usual at work events, which she told herself was because the wine was very good and not because sitting at this particular table while Dorian toasted Sarah in exactly the terms she had once, humiliatingly, imagined being toasted in herself. The wine was just very good. After dinner the party drifted to the front drawing room, and Billy drifted to the side passage that led to the small courtyard garden, because she needed air and quiet in roughly equal measure. She stood in the dark courtyard with a last inch of wine and the night sky above her. Properly dark up here, far enough from the city that the stars were real and numerous, and she let herself be tired. Just for a moment. Just here, where no one could see it. "You're cold." She startled. He was standing just inside the courtyard door, a dark coat in one hand. He held it out toward her. "I'm fine," she said automatically. "You're shivering." He said it with the same factual tone he used for everything, like he was simply reporting conditions. She looked down at her arms. She was in fact shivering. She'd been ignoring it. She took the coat. It was heavy wool, and it smelled of forest, and that thing she still couldn't name, that deep green alive smell from the night before, and she pulled it around her shoulders, and something in her that had been pulled taut since she arrived eased by a fraction. He didn't leave. She didn't ask him to. "This is a beautiful property," she said after a while. "It's a burden mostly." He said it without self-pity, as a neutral fact. "Was it your parents'?" A pause. "My father's. And his father's. 7 generations. That's a long time to be one place." "Yes," he said. And then, "Where are you from?" She considered the question. "I don't really have a from," she said. "I was adopted. My parents were lovely, but I always felt like someone had put me in the wrong landscape." She heard herself saying it and felt surprised at the saying of it. She didn't usually say things like that. "Sorry. That's—" "No," he said. "I understand that exactly." She looked at him. He was looking at the stars, and in his profile she saw something that might have been recognition, the kind that hurts slightly because it's accurate. "You feel like you were put in the wrong landscape," she said. He didn't answer right away. Then, "I feel like I've been waiting for something I couldn't name. For a long time." He stopped. His jaw tightened. "Ignore that. The wine. You barely touched yours." He looked at her then, and she had the sensation she'd had that morning again, of a door that was almost open, that was visibly, effortfully closing itself. She watched him do it. She watched him choose it. "You should go in," he said. "You have a long day tomorrow." "So do you. I know this estate in my sleep. You have 14 vendors to coordinate." She almost smiled. "You've been watching. It's my property." "That's not what I meant." Another pause. The stars were very bright. His breath made a small cloud in the cold air between them. "Go inside, Billy," he said quietly. She went inside. She kept the coat around her shoulders until she reached the stairs. Then she folded it carefully and set it on the hall table, and stood there with her hands still on the wool, feeling the warmth it had held, and told herself very firmly that she was just grateful for the warmth. Just the warmth. Completely. Chapter 5. Wedding morning. Billy had been awake since 5. She operated on pure logistical momentum, which was a gear she was very good at, and she moved through the estate in that mode. Checking, confirming, redirecting, soothing. And if her hands occasionally stilled on a task for no apparent reason, she put it down to the sleepless nights accumulating. Sarah was luminous. That was the only word. She sat in the dressing room in her robe while the hair and makeup team worked, and she was incandescent with happiness in the way that Billy had always hoped for her, that specific brightness of someone getting exactly what they'd been waiting for. Billy stood behind her in the mirror and held things and fetched things and made 3 phone calls, and when Sarah grabbed her hand and squeezed it and said, "I love you, Bill. You're my whole heart," Billy squeezed back and said, "You look astonishing. Dorian is going to be a complete wreck." She meant both of those things completely. That was the real thing about grief, she thought. The complicated kind, the kind that wasn't clean. It didn't cancel the love. It just sat next to it, dense and heavy, and you carried them both. She stepped out for 10 minutes to check on the ceremony flowers. The great hall was empty, the arch placed exactly where Matthew Gray had suggested. South window, the light falling through it in long afternoon gold slants across the stone floor. The flowers were perfect. Cream and ivory and deep green, full and fragrant. Billy stood in the middle of the room and looked at it all and felt, with a clarity that surprised her, that it was going to be a good wedding. Not good for her. That was a different question with a more complicated answer. But good. True. The right place for the right moment. She was still standing there when the door at the far end of the hall opened and Matthew Gray walked in. He stopped when he saw her. She should have said something efficient and moved on. She'd been saying efficient things and moving on all morning. But she was standing in this beautiful room with the light coming in, and she had been very busy not falling apart for 2 days running. And something about the way he stopped when he saw her. The complete stillness, like her presence physically arrested him. Something about that just... She didn't fall apart, but something shifted. "Sorry," she said. "Just checking the arch." "It's fine." He moved into the room slowly. He looked like he hadn't slept either, and there was something careful about the way he was moving, like a person navigating around a pain they won't acknowledge. "Are you all right?" she asked. He looked at her. In the full morning light, his eyes were extraordinary. The gray of them had a warmth she hadn't seen in artificial light, something almost amber at the center. "No," he said. The honesty of it knocked the air out of her. She stared at him. "I'm sorry," he said, and he sounded genuinely wrong-footed, like he hadn't intended that at all. "Disregard that. You said you were fine just now and you weren't, and then you told the truth by accident," she said slowly. "That's interesting." Something very close to an expression crossed his face. "You're very," he began. "Observant," she said. "People always say observant. It's fine, I know it can be annoying. I was going to say accurate." The light came through the south window and lay across the stone floor between them, and the flowers were fragrant, and Billy Ashworth thought, very clearly in exactly those words, "Oh no," because she had been so careful. She had been so careful since she'd arrived, keeping the whole thing in its proper compartments. The grief about Dorian, the job of the wedding, the strange pull of this property and its owner. And now here was the oh no, the inevitable small terrible clarity, the moment where the brain finally stops lying to itself and says, "You've been thinking about this man since the second he walked through that doorway." She looked at the flowers. "The arch looks perfect," she said. "It does," he agreed. Neither of them moved for just a moment too long. Then Billy's phone buzzed. The string quartet. She looked at the screen, and the moment broke apart, and she was back in her function mode, stepping toward the door with an apologetic gesture, and she did not look back. He watched her go. He put one hand flat against the stone doorframe, and it was the same gesture she'd made against the window glass 2 nights before, without knowing it. He stayed there a long time after she'd left. In the wedding later, he would stand at the back of the great hall and watch her stand at the altar's edge with steady hands and a steady face, and the light would fall the way he'd said it would, and she would not look at him once. He would not be able to look away from her. Chapter 6. The reception had been going for 3 hours when Billy slipped out. She'd earned it. She'd managed everything. The dinner service, the toast schedule, the moment when the DJ played the wrong first dance song, and she'd corrected it so smoothly that Sarah never knew. She'd danced exactly twice, and then retired to the edges where she was more comfortable anyway, watching everything, making sure it was running right. She was tired in the way that goes through the body and hits something beneath it. She found herself at the edge of the formal garden, heels off, grass cold under her feet, the music from the reception a warm blurred sound behind her. The moon was up, full and close feeling, the kind that made the world look like a different world. A better one, maybe, or a stranger one. She stood in the moon-silver grass and let the noise fall back, and she breathed. She'd done it. She'd been here for 2 days and done her job and loved her sister properly and carried the grief quietly, and she had not once, made it anyone's problem. She was so tired of being so capable. It was a private thought, the kind she normally caught before it fully formed. She let it run this time. Just here. Just in the moonlight. She'd been doing it her whole life. The adopted child who never quite fit, learning very early that being useful was safer than being needy. That capability was the price of belonging. She had gotten very good at the price. She had gotten so good at it she'd lost track of what she was paying it for. "You never ask for," Dorian had said. "You always just handle everything." She'd taken it as a compliment. She'd taken it as a compliment because that was all it had been, but also because compliments were what you took, because asking for more was, the scent hit her. That was the only way to describe it. It was not something she smelled so much as something that moved through her, deep and dark and forest wild, and threaded through with something that was almost pain. She turned. Matthew Gray was standing at the edge of the garden 20 feet away. He was not entirely himself. That was the only way she could process what she saw. He was Matthew Gray, unmistakably. The same face, the same dark clothing. But something else was present in his bearing, something that was neither cold nor controlled. Something that was looking at her with an intensity that bypassed thought entirely. His eyes, in the moonlight, were not gray. They were lit from within with a pale amber gold, and they were fixed on her with the same absolute certainty as the wolf in the treeline 2 nights ago. Oh, she thought. Of course. Billy. His voice was lower than usual. Rougher. He said her name like he was holding something with both hands. "You need to go inside." She didn't move. "You were the wolf." A muscle in his jaw jumped. "Inside. Now. Please. You came to my window." She took a step toward him instead of back, because apparently her body had decided it was done taking instructions. 2 nights ago you were watching. I'm telling you to go inside. And now his voice had changed again, gone urgent in a way that was all control barely holding. I can't. I need you to not be standing there in the moonlight. I need you to. Matthew. She said his name for the first time and watched something in him fracture. What's happening to you? I don't know, he said, and the words came out raw and broken and appalled. I don't know. Since you arrived, I haven't been able to, Billy. He stopped. He turned away from her. One hand braced against one of the garden's stone pillars, and she could see it in the line of his back, the massive effort of whatever he was fighting against himself. His hand on the stone was white-knuckled. In the moonlight, the shadows moved wrong around him, too large, too animal. She went to him anyway. Don't, he said, not turning around. She put her hand on his back. The sound he made was not human and was not a word, and she felt it through her palm, through her whole arm, like a frequency she could feel in her spine. He went completely rigid, and then slowly, against every visible indication of his will, he turned. His eyes were full amber now, the shift complete, and she should have been afraid, and she was not afraid. She was present in a way she had not been in years, breathing fast and clear and certain. You're not afraid of me, he said, wondering, broken, furious at himself for the wonder. No, she said. Tell me what's happening. I can't. The words were ground out. If I tell you, you'll run or you'll stay, and I can't. Either way, I can't. Tell me. In the moonlight at the edge of the formal garden of Greyveil Estate, with the music from her sister's reception warm in the distance, Matthew Gray told her the truth. Chapter 7. He started in the middle, the way people start things they have been carrying alone too long. My grandmother made a bargain, he said, generations ago. The details have been lost. What she traded, what she wanted in return. What remained was this. Every gray alpha after her would have a fated mate, a true match, and would never be able to recognize them in human form. Only the wolf would know. And the wolf, his jaw tightened. The wolf could not complete the bond without killing the mate, because the mate would always be human. Billy was quiet. The wolf recognizes and hunts. The man. I wake up in the forest with no memory of the night, and there's always, he stopped, evidence that I've been nearby someone, that I've been drawn to someone. It happened before. Twice. I intervened before it could go too far. I sent them away, made excuses. His voice was flat, describing violence done to himself. I built walls, made myself unavailable, removed myself from situations where it could. And then I showed up for my sister's wedding, Billy said softly. You showed up, he said. And you can't remember wanting to come near me? In the morning I know something happened. I know because, he looked at her. You found me in the kitchen. I'd been up all night. The whole night I don't have, and in the kitchen I looked at you and... He pressed the heel of his hand to his sternum. Something. The wolf knows you. It won't stop knowing you. Billy sat down on the garden bench. Her feet were cold in the grass, and her mind was running faster than she usually let it. Can it kill me? She said. The bite, if it happened. A long silence. Yes, he said. Without question. Humans don't survive claiming bites. His voice thinned. It would kill you, and I would have to live with that. Which is why I need you to go inside, and tomorrow after the wedding. I should leave, she said. Yes. She looked at her hands. And if I don't want to? A quiet that had weight. Billy. Her name in his mouth like something fragile. I am telling you that my wolf wants to claim you. That if you stay near me, the instinct will keep building. That I cannot, he stopped. I am not able to guarantee I can control it indefinitely. Do you understand what I'm saying? I understand, she said. What did it feel like? When you were near me and didn't know it? What were you doing? He looked at her strangely. You put the coat on the hall table when I left it, she said quietly. Mara said it had been moved before I told her where I'd left it. That was you. She paused. The arch. You knew which window would give the best light. You've been paying attention to things I haven't told you. What does it feel like? He sat down. Not beside her. 2 feet of garden bench between them, which felt both enormous and insufficient. Like gravity, he said finally. Like everything else is slightly unreal, and you're the only thing with weight. He said it quietly, like a confession that had surprised him. He stopped. Started again. I keep knowing where you are in the building. I wake up knowing which room you're in. Billy thought about the window, the hand on the glass. I know you. She thought about the kitchen at 6 in the morning, the way something in her had been glad with a gladness that went too deep for a near stranger. She thought about 2 days of telling herself, it's just the estate, it's just the strangeness, it's not. I think, she said slowly, that it might not be one-sided. He looked at her. I'm not. She tried to order her thoughts. I don't know what I am. I was adopted. I never knew my birth family. I've always felt wrong in myself. Like there's something in me that I don't have language for. I've been feeling it more since I got here. Like something is waking up. He went very still. What? She said. Your scent, he said slowly. I've been trying to understand it since you arrived. It's not quite human, Billy. It's almost human. But there's something else in it, underneath, and I kept thinking I was... He stood up. I kept thinking I was wrong. That the wanting was making me smell what I needed to smell. What does it smell like? She asked. The underneath. He looked at her for a long moment. Pack, he said. It smells like pack. The reception wound down. Cars left. The estate settled into its nighttime quiet, and Billy sat in the library with Mara, who had appeared with tea at 11 p.m. like someone had called her, and told Mara what had been said in the garden. Mara put down her mug and looked at her for a very long time. His grandmother's curse, she said. Yes, I was afraid of this. You know about it. I've managed this estate for 22 years. I know everything about it. She folded her hands around her mug. Twice before, the wolf found someone. He intervened. He drove them away. He was protecting them. In his way. Her voice was careful and sad. He believes it will always kill them. He's been told it will always kill them. What he doesn't know, what I've never had proof of, only suspicion, is that the curse specified human mates. It said human mates cannot survive the claiming. Billy waited. If you're not wholly human, Mara said quietly, if there's a wolf in you sleeping, waiting, then the conditions of the curse may not apply to you at all. May not, Billy said. May not, Mara repeated honestly. I'm not certain. No one can be certain. And it's not a risk I would take lightly. Billy wrapped both hands around her tea. No, she said. Neither would I. She sat with it. The whole impossible weight of it. The wolf in the treeline. The hand on the glass. The way his eyes looked when he said gravity, and then looked appalled at himself for saying it. The thing in her that had been waking up since she crossed the iron gates. That was more awake now than she had ever felt in her whole careful, capable life. Mara watched her. He's going to try to send you away, Mara said. Tomorrow. He'll be very polite about it. Very decisive. He'll tell himself it's for your protection. He already tried tonight, Billy said. And you're still here. I'm still here, she agreed. Chapter 8. The morning after was very quiet. Sarah and Dorian had left for the airport at 7. The caterers were packing. The string quartet had gone. The estate was emptying itself of the wedding like water leaving a glass, and Billy was supposed to be in that emptying. Her own bag was packed, standing by the door to her room. But she was sitting on the bottom step of the main staircase watching Mara direct the removal of higher furniture, and she was not quite leaving. Matthew Gray came through the front hall at 9 o'clock. He stopped when he saw her on the stairs. Your sister's gone, he said. I know. The cars to the station run at 10 and 2. I know. She looked up at him. Sit down. He didn't sit down. He stood in the front hall in the morning light and looked at her with those extraordinary eyes and did not ask her to go, which she noticed. I want to try something, she said. And I need you to trust me. Billy, I know what you're going to say. I've thought through every version of it since 4 o'clock this morning. I know the risk. I know your history. I know why you've been protecting people by pushing them away. She kept her voice level. I also know what Mara told me last night. I also know what I am starting to suspect about myself. And I think, Matthew, I think it matters that you tell me what I am to your wolf. A long pause. You know what you are, he said, quiet and rough. I want to hear you say it. He sat down on the step beside her. Not quite touching, close enough that she could feel the warmth of him. The warmth that had been increasing since the garden, she noticed. The cold that had been his signature was giving ground. Every gray alpha before me tried to outrun it, he said. Or ignore it. Or destroy it. The ones who tried to destroy it, he stopped. My father found his fated mate and tried to eliminate the bond. He thought if he ended her life before the wolf could act, he thought the curse would pass. It didn't. His voice was flat, covering something that had clearly been devastating. It compounded. The curse bent inward. He lived another 30 years and never. He turned away. Never recovered. From what he'd done. From what he'd been made to do. Your father killed her, Billy said. He believed it was mercy. He said it like something he'd been told and never believed. Better that than his wolf. He was wrong. Yes. Simple and absolute. He was wrong. She put her hand over his. He went still the way he had in the garden. That complete, fractured stillness. The stillness of someone who has not been touched gently in a very long time. I don't think the curse is what you were told it is, she said. I think it was a protection that became a trap because no one understood it properly. I think it was trying to give gray alphas a mate who could survive them. And it kept failing because every time it found someone, the man or the wolf acted before. She stopped. Started again. What would happen if we stopped acting? If we just let it be what it is without either of us fighting it? I don't know, he said. I think that's the first honest answer to that question anyone in your bloodline has ever given. He looked down at her hand on his. I am trying, he said very quietly, very hard to be responsible. I know, she said. I can feel you trying. It's Matthew, it's exhausting to watch. You're doing this enormous amount of work to make sure I'm safe, and you won't let me help you do it. Something moved across his face. Not quite breaking, just opening. My wolf, he said. My wolf knows you. It has known you since before you got through the gate. It has been certain of you in a way that nothing has ever. He stopped. And I can't remember it. Every morning the certainty is gone, and you are a guest on my estate, and I have to start over pretending I don't know what you mean. And his voice went rough. I'm so tired of the pretending. Then stop, she said. He turned and looked at her, and his eyes were shifting, the amber rising in the gray. And she met it with everything she had, all her steadiness and all her observant quiet heart. And she felt something in herself respond to the amber in him, something deep and unnameable reaching upward like a plant toward light. I think I have a wolf too, she said. I think it's been asleep my whole life. I think it woke up when I crossed your gate. He was looking at her with an expression that was not cold at all. Billy, he said. Tell me you love me, she said. The real version. The one you've been not saying. His jaw worked. That's not. Tell me. Her voice was soft, but it was not a request. I don't know how long he stopped. Tried again. I think the wolf has loved you longer than I have had words for anything. And a visible struggle, enormous and intimate. I am not good at this. I have been alone a very long time, by choice, because it was safer, because... His hand turned under hers and his fingers closed around hers. I love you, he said. I love you in a way that has been making me completely irrational since the moment you walked onto my property with your clipboard and your composure, and I have been... He breathed out. I have been wrecked. She laughed. It was a small, surprised, real laugh, and it clearly undid something in him because his expression went helpless in a way she thought almost no one had ever seen. I love you too, she said. I know this is very fast. I know this doesn't make any sense. But I've been... She thought of Dorian. The grief and its weight, and the way it had lived in her chest for years. The way it had, in the last 2 days, been quietly, completely displaced. I've been carrying the wrong thing, she said. For a long time. And I think he kissed her. He kissed her the way the whole story had been building toward without them knowing it. Not tentative, not gentle, but honest. His hands came up and held her face with a careful ferocity, and she felt the warmth of him through her whole body. And the thing inside her that had no name rose up like a tide, and she was not afraid of it. She was home in it. She was finally absolutely home. Chapter 9. She had thought about it for 2 days, and she made the choice with her eyes open. That was important. She needed you to know that. She did not stumble into it, did not fall into it in a moment of passion, did not let it happen to her. She made the choice in full knowledge of the risk, with her whole self present, because she had spent her entire life being sensible and small, and now something was asking her to be large, and she was going to say yes. She told Matthew this. He said, "I will not be responsible for." "You're not being responsible for it," she said. "I am. Those are different things." He argued. He was extremely thorough about arguing. He walked every version of the risk for her, left nothing out, was more rigorously honest about the danger than anyone who loved her would have been, and she sat with all of it, and when he was finished she said, "Do you believe I might be a shifter?" "I believe it's possible." "More than possible?" His jaw tightened. "Yes. Then let me decide." He looked at her for a long, long time. "The wolf might not wait for you to decide," he said. "That's the other thing. I can hold it. I can hold it for a while. But it's been—" "I know," she said. "I felt it in the garden. If anything happens that you don't—" "Matthew." She put her palm against his chest. "Stop trying to protect me out of this." A long exhale. "All right," he said. They were in the library. Moonlight through the tall windows. The fire he'd built when the evening turned cold, which she had thought was for her warmth, and then thought also that he had wanted the normalcy of the task, the small useful tending of a thing. That was how he loved. She had been reading the language of it for 2 days. It was not quick or simple. The wolf came up slowly, over the course of an hour that was both enormous and nothing, and she watched him fight it and hold it until she told him to stop fighting. And when he finally stopped fighting, it came with a sound that was partly a word and partly not, and the bite, when it came, burned like being remade, which she supposed was exactly what it was. There is a space in the story between the burning and the waking that Billy could never quite describe afterward. She tried sometimes. There were no words in English for what happened in that space. The sense of a door swinging open inside herself onto a room that had always been there, the smell of pack and forest and him, the shape of something that had been folded very small for 28 years unfolding, stretching into the true size of itself. Later she would describe it as, like finally crying after a very long time, except it was also like running, except it was also like coming home. When she was herself again, herself, and also more than herself, and also different permanently. She was in the library with the fire burned lower, and Matthew Gray kneeling on the floor in front of where she sat, holding her hands in both of his with an expression she had never seen on a face before. It was terror and wonder mixed together in a proportion that made her throat ache. "You're alive," he said. "Obviously," she said. Her voice was strange, fuller somehow, like it was coming from a deeper place. "Billy, I told you." "You," he pressed his forehead to her hands. The gesture was so unguarded, so entirely unlike the man who had said "I own it" in the great hall 3 days ago, that she had to breathe through it. "The bond is, I can feel you. I can feel you from here." He looked up. "I could feel you. The whole time, I just couldn't." The man couldn't access what the wolf. "You know me now," she said. "I've always known you," he said. "I just couldn't." He stopped. "The curse. Is it gone?" Wonder in the word. "It's Billy, it's gone. I can feel where it was. There's nothing there." He turned her hands over, looked at them. "It's gone." She looked at him in the firelight. This man who had been fighting himself for 30 years, who had built walls and sent people away and been alone in this estate with his burden and his grief and the memory of his father's terrible mistake. And she loved him in a way that felt like geology. Old. Structural. The kind of love that was not an event, but a condition. "Well," she said. "Now what?" He laughed. She had not heard him laugh before. She didn't have time to prepare for it. It was low and surprised, and it crinkled the corners of his extraordinary eyes. And she thought, "I will spend a great deal of my life making you do that." "Now what indeed?" he said. He sat beside her on the library floor, their backs against the settee, shoulders touching. And they stayed like that while the fire burned down and the moon moved across the windows, and the estate around them was quiet in a way it had perhaps never been quiet before. She could feel him, exactly as he'd described it. A warm, steady, unmistakable presence at the edge of her awareness. The way you feel the sun on the side of your face without looking at it. She thought she would feel it for the rest of her life. She thought she didn't mind that at all. Chapter 10. The last chapter began with coffee. Matthew made it. Actually made it. Whole bean ground by hand in a mill that was probably 100 years old. In the kitchen that smelled of bread and stone, and the particular morning air of a place where things had settled into rightness overnight. Billy sat on the kitchen counter, bare feet. One of his dark woolen jumpers swamped around her, and watched him move around the kitchen he'd been alone in for so long. And something in the watching was its own kind of ceremony. She called Sarah from the kitchen table at 8 in the morning. Sarah, from an airport lounge somewhere, very quickly understood that something had changed and demanded a complete account. Billy gave her an edited version. "The estate owner turned out to be rather important to me. It's a long story. I'm staying for a few days." And Sarah made the particular high-pitched sound that meant she was going to need a very long phone call very soon. But she also said, "Oh, Bill. Finally." "Finally what?" "Finally something for you." Billy was quiet for a moment. Matthew, across the kitchen, was not looking at her and was obviously listening. "Maybe," she said. "Not maybe," Sarah said. "Finally." After the call, Matthew refilled her mug without asking, and she wrapped her hands around it and said, "I need to tell you about being adopted." He sat down opposite her. She told him everything she'd never told anyone about the particular ache of it. The not fitting, the feeling of wrong landscape, the way she had always suspected something was missing that she couldn't name. He listened the way he did everything, with his full, unmoving attention, taking it seriously, asking nothing. When she finished, he said, "I can try to find records. Your birth pack, if there was one. Some packs have kept registers for generations. It won't be. I know it won't be easy," she said. "I'll start today," he said. "You don't have to." "I'll start today," he said again simply. She looked at him across the kitchen table with the morning light coming in through the tall window, and felt the warm, steady pulse of him at the edge of her awareness, and thought, "This is what I was being kept for." Not in a tragic way. In the way of someone who has been cold for a long time and finally stood in the sun. She reached across the table. He took her hand. He didn't look up from her hand for a long time, just held it with both of his, and was very still. And she understood from everything she had learned to read about him that he was doing the same thing. Sitting in the sun after a very long cold. There was a lot of practical life ahead of them. She knew that. Packs and politics and a world she had not known existed a week ago. And her whole actual life in the city and his whole actual life in this estate. And a bond that meant things neither of them had fully parsed yet. There was a great deal of complexity in the future. The coffee was very good. The morning was very clear. His thumb was tracing small circles on her hand without him seeming to notice he was doing it. She decided the future could wait until the second cup. There is a morning in November, 14 months after the wedding. Billy is in the library. Her library, now, or close enough, the particular chairs in front of the fire having become understood as their chairs by some unspoken consensus. Going through records from a pack in northern Scotland that Matthew's contact had uncovered. She has been doing this for 8 months. Sometimes it is painful. Sometimes it is revelatory. She is learning to hold both. The fire is good today. Outside, the grounds are frost silver, the formal garden having gone wild at its edges the way she's asked Fen, who now does a day a month on the estate, to let it. She likes the wildness at the edges. She likes the garden saying, "We are tended, but we are also free." There are footsteps on the stairs, small and emphatic. Rook, 3 years old, a name they arrived at after a very long debate about birds versus trees versus things that sounded good in both human and wolf register, comes through the library door at a velocity that should not be possible at that height and demands, without preamble, "Where's the East Wing?" Billy says, without looking up. She can feel where Matthew is in the estate the way she's always been able to feel it, that warm sun-on-the-face awareness. He's on the phone. "Don't interrupt unless there's blood." "There's no blood," Rook says seriously. He climbs up beside her, which involves a great deal of effort and one of her files being knocked on the floor, and settles himself under her arm with the complete confidence of someone who has never once doubted he was wanted. He smells of outside and something green and wolf, already, at 3 years old, a miniature version of the scent she has known to be home for over a year. He picks up one of the records she was looking at, stares at it with enormous fake concentration. He cannot read yet, but he has strong opinions about documents. "This one's important," he announces. "Which one?" He points at one more or less at random. "This one." "You're probably right," she says seriously. He nods, satisfied. The fire pops. Outside, a crow lands on the garden wall, and then thinks better of it. One of the estate dogs, there are 3 of them now, where there were none when she arrived, makes a sound somewhere below them that means someone has arrived. Matthew appears in the library doorway at about the same time she senses him coming. His hair is slightly disordered from the phone call, which happens when he runs a hand through it. He looks at the 2 of them in the chair. The expression on his face is the same one she saw on the library floor 14 months ago. Wonder and terror mixed in some proportion that she thinks will rearrange itself more toward wonder over time, but may never fully lose the terror. And she has learned that the terror is part of the love. "Mara says lunch in 20 minutes, he says. "What is it?" Rook demands. "Soup." "What kind?" "The kind you'll eat." This is apparently insufficient. Rook slides down from the chair and goes to negotiate with Mara directly, which Matthew watches him do with the expression of a man who has accepted that this is his life and is, not in spite of everything but because of everything, deeply and completely all right with that. He comes into the library. He moves Billy's stack of records aside without comment, making room, and sits beside her in his chair. She leans against him, and he puts his arm around her with the ease of a thing done 1,000 times. "Anything useful?" he asks, meaning the records. "Maybe. There's a woman, Margaret, 3rd generation, who left the pack in 1970. Young. The records don't say why. But the timing. Could be. Could be," she agrees. The fire is warm. The grounds are frost silver outside. Somewhere below them, Rook is making a passionate argument to Mara about what kind of soup constitutes acceptable lunch, and Mara is responding in the patient, firm voice that means she has already decided and is giving him the dignity of the argument. Matthew presses his mouth to the top of Billy's head. She folds the records, looks at the fire. "I want to write to that branch," she says. "See if Margaret had children. See if anyone remembers. I'll reach out to my contact tomorrow," he says. "You don't have to." "I know," he says. He does it anyway, because that is how he loves, and she has known it for over a year, and knowing it still does something warm and structural in her chest, every single time. Outside, the crow comes back to the garden wall and stays this time. The frost begins slowly to melt in the morning light. Inside, the fire burns well, and the family is loud at lunch, and the estate breathes around them all. Old stone, 7 generations of Greys, and now something new settling into it. A woman who had been the wrong landscape her whole life become, at last, the right one. "Hey, if you made it to the end of this one, you are completely wonderful, and I need you to know that writing Billy just absolutely wrecked me in the best possible way. She's been living in my head for a while, and I hope she found her way into yours too. I would love to know your favorite moment in the comments. Was it the kitchen scene? The garden? The library floor? Tell me everything. I genuinely read every single one. And if you want the bonus scenes, the full claiming scene, the conversation where Billy finds out about her birth pack, and a little rook scene that made me cry, those are all over on Patreon, link in the description. You are so appreciated. See you next time.